This lesson, we're going to be creating a typing game. So this game is going to be set in using JavaScript. So created all with JavaScript. We've got a set of words that are going to be displayed, and we can set different parameters for the game. So right now I've got it set to show 3 words from the pool of words within the array. You hit the start button, and then you need to type the words that are being displayed. If you press a space or the enter, it'll automatically track that word and then store that, and then at the end it will produce you an accuracy report. So the accuracy, the amount of time that it took, and then for each word that was typed, so the word that was typed and then the correct word. And you can restart the game through it as many times as needed. Always it will track the accuracy. So this was what was typed, this was the word that was expected to be typed, the accuracy of 50%. The dog was accuracy 100%, and people was an accuracy of 83. So that gave us a total score of accuracy of 77% with a time of 5.57 seconds. Let's go ahead and we're going to set up the gameplay area. So we've got a main element, and we want to create all of the page elements using JavaScript, and that's all going to be contained within the main object. So using the document and query selector, we're going to select the main element, and then we're going to add elements into main. Let's also create a function, and this function will create an element. It's going to require some parameters. The first parameter will be the type of element that we're creating. The second one is going to be the parent of the element. Next, we can add in some content into it, so we can call that HTML. And then lastly, if we have a class, we can add in the class. So we'll create some parameters there, as we're going to be creating a few page elements, and this way we'll make it a little bit easier to add them to the page. So first off, let's go ahead and we're going to create a text area. And this is going to be where the content is going to be written. So using the create elements, the element that we're creating is going to be a text area. The parent for that is going to be the main object. The HTML can just be blank, and the class can be text area. Let's go back into the function, and now let's create those elements. So the element that we're creating using the document, create element, create an element using the argument T for the type of element, and then P for representing the parent. And what we'll do is we're going to do a return. And with append child, there's going to be a callback of the element object that was created. Within the elements, let's update the inner HTML. We'll set that to HTML. And for the element class list, we're going to add whatever class that we've specified. So that will create a text area on the page. Go over to the HTML, you can inspect it under the body within the main. There's our text area with a class of text area. So this can be our main typing area. Also want to add in a button that we can use in order to start and to stop the gameplay. So let's create another element, and this one will be showing that we are creating a button. So the type of element that we're creating is going to be a button. It's going to be appended to the main area. And the button will start out by saying start, and I'll give it a class of btn. So that will create a button for the start area. We also want to have an output area and create the elements. And this is going to be a div that we're going to have the output content into. The parent can be main. And then within here, we'll just call it, we'll just add some instructions for the user when we start the gameplay. So that gives instructions to the user in order to start the gameplay. So right away, what we'll do first is we're going to hide the text area. So do a display and set that to display none, as we don't need that showing yet, and it's only when we start the game that we want to have the text content showing. Next, let's create some text that we want to output. This is going to be an array of words that we want to type. Words. So just create some words that you can add in to an array called words. And we're going to select these words randomly, show them to the user, and the user is going to have to type the words that we're displaying. I'm going to create another element that we can use as a global game object, and then this way we can reference it from other parts of the game. So now we've got instructions that new texts, or we actually probably don't need the new text, it just needs to say press start. So that's going to kick off the start of the game, and that's going to be the first part of the game. So just add in an on click, and we can just run the start game, create a function to handle the start game. So we want to display the text area, so display it as block. Take the button, and we'll set the display to none, so do the style display. So that will hide the button, so that the user can't press the button anymore. So right now we should have some instructions, and we should display the information to the user. So we're going to have a countdown clock to let the user get ready before we start displaying the words. And this is where we can use the interval that will kick off the gameplay, and we want to output that interval content to the user. So right now we don't want them displaying or typing anything quite yet. So we just select the text area. So adding in focus to the text area. So we press start. So right away we've already got focus into the text area using the focus method. And then we'll set up the interval in order to have a countdown to start the game. And then once we do the start and we show the words, this is where the gameplay will start and the gameplay will continue. We'll create another function. Let's call that gameplay. So let's set the interval, and I'm going to set up a game timer. So adding it into the game object, and where we've got the game object, set the timer to be null. So that will clear and create that object for us that we can then use. And then set the interval and set a counter value that we can decrease and show to the user that we're updating the counter value. The interval can show every 100 milliseconds. And you can adjust this as needed or set it up to 500 milliseconds. Let's output the content into the output area. And this again is going to be instructions for the user. So set the text content for the output area. And here we can have the counter value. And then take counter, subtract 1. And we'll have a condition if counter is less than or equal to 0, then we want to clear the interval. So use the clear interval and clear the game timer interval. So let's press start and we'll see what happens. So there we've got our countdown. And then that will run the gameplay. And we can also update this to 1000. So that will give us a interval there. And we can move the text content area and the focus of the text content area within the gameplay. And then we'll also show that once we hit 0. Also update the output. So it'll say get ready, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then once it's done, then it should say go. And it should start outputting the words. And we've provided the focus onto the text area. Within the game object, I want to select the number of words. So let's create a variable for number. This is the number of words. And then the words that we want to display. So that can be within an array. And I'll just call that array 1. So this is going to be the array that we're going to be displaying. So we want to build out this array. We're going to be using the words from the words array. And we might also want to duplicate them so we can build out multiple words there. So let's create that, where we're going to create an array of words. And this will just be building the array. And this will continue to build the array while the game array1 length is less than 20. So that will be the condition. And then we want to add a random word. So let's get the index value. So random index value. And here we can use the math floor to select a word and math random. Multiply it by the word's length. So this will get us a random index value where we can select a random word. Let's also track the last index value so that we're not duplicating them. And I keep that outside of the array. So we'll check to see if the last index is not equal to the random index. And then we know we're good to add more words into the game array, where we can push the words with whatever we've got for the random index. And that will add to the array. And then here we can set the last index to equal whatever we've got for the random index. So this will build out our array of words. And once we're done, we can console log the result into the console. And we'll try that out within the console just to make sure that it is working. So run the function build array. So that builds out an array, and that means that each word is going to be followed by a different word. So these are randomly, again, selected from the array. And the more words that you have in here, the more that you can go through. So right now it's going to build an array of 20 items, and we want to also use that dynamically. So game number. So that will create an array with 20 items in there. So when we start the game, that can build the array there. We're building the array. And also within the array, so before we build it, let's set the length to 0. So that will clear out any existing content that's already within the array when we set the length to 0. So once we start, then it goes through and it builds the array. I'm going to update this to be quicker so we don't have to wait as long to get the gameplay action happening. So there we've got the array, it's built. We want to focus on the text area once we're ready, so the focus is done there. And then here we want to show the words. So while there's still words within that array, we want to show them. So we want to select the first word that's within the array. So within the game array 1, and then we'll console log out whatever we've got for W. And we'll take the build array outside of the interval. And instead of using the pop, we'll track whatever the current word is, and then we'll use that. So we can have that within the game, and this will be just setting whatever the current word by the index from that array. So instead of using pop, we'll output the current. So this will give us an opportunity to show the next word as well. So that's the current. And then this is going to be the next word. So showing both of those words. And that actually should be game current. So there's our two first words, the horse and the duck. So that's going to be the current word. So we'll output that into the output area. And I'm actually going to clear the contents from output area and create elements for the words so that I can have different classes and different colors for the word elements. So this is going to be displaying whatever we've got for the first current word, and you're going to create an element that's going to get appended into output. So output is the parent. The element that we're creating is going to be a span. The HTML for the span is going to be W, and we'll just give it a class of current or cur_w. Let's also create the next word. So this is going to be the next word that's coming out, and we're just going to be using the next W for that, and the output for this one is going to be the result for N. So there's our two words, and we also should have some spacing between them. Can use classes for these to apply some styling to the elements. So for the current word, and then also for the next. So make the next word the font size will be slightly smaller, and the font size for the current word will be larger. And also update the color, so we can gray out the color slightly, and the current word will be just dark, just black. So there's the words. Let's also add in some padding for these. So just do 10 pixels for both of them. So there's the current word, and there's the next word that's coming. I'm going to add the key down event to the text area so that we can track whenever the key is pressed down. So within the text area, let's add an event listener. And the event that we're listening for is going to be key down, which is going to fire off the key press or the key checker function. And let's create that function in order to handle the key checker. So this is only when the game is in play. So let's add in another value. And this can just be a Boolean value that we can toggle to check to see if the game is in play. So the game in play will be true once we're ready and we start the game. So set the game in play to be true and run the key checker. So we want to check to see what the event object is on the key. And let's get the key value. So we can track spaces, we can track enters. You can also get the key code. So there's a number of ways to get the values. So with the space and the enter, so those are the two that we want to track. So if the key code is equal to enter, or if the E code is equal to space, then we want to end the word and move on to the next word. So let's do that where we're going to have the show words and take the game current, increment it by 1, and then just do the show words. We also want to clear out any content that we have within the text area. So text area value, and set that to be blank. And then track the text area value into a second array. And I'll just call that ARR2. And that's where we're going to be tracking the user's results there. So we push in the result for the text area. And we want to strip out any white space. So we want to remove any white space around that content. And we can do that where we're using the trim method. Allow us to trim any excess white space from that content. Let's also update this. Instead of being a text area, we're going to update that to be an input. And then we can select the text area and set the type as an input. So set the attribute. So that will remove out the multiple lines and only have just the one line. So once we run out of the words, then we need to end the game. So we're not able to display anything additional to there. So we'll have a conditional check to see if game current is going to be greater than the game number, where we've got the number of words that we want to use. And if it is, then this is where the game is going to end. And for now, I'll just write into the console game over. If we still have a value there that we can add in whatever the current word is and add that to the screen. And we'll have one other condition there that's going to check to see for the next word. And here we're just simply checking to see if the current word plus 1 is equal to greater than the number. And here we need to use the less than, and this will output those values into the container, just as before, but with the conditions now controlling that we're gonna, once we run out of words to display. I can also update this to only display 3 words, and I'm gonna get rid of the console values there. I was throwing an error. So that will stop showing, and it looks like we're still showing a little bit there. So we've got 1 word and no words left. So that second one now actually shouldn't be showing. And now we've got the game over. So we've got the functionality working. Let's check to see if we've tracked 3 items into the game array, and we've got all 3 of those. So next, what we want to, once we have the game over, we want to do a final check to see the matching and output the results to the user. So create a function called game over, and this is where we're going to calculate out the results, do a comparison for the accuracy of the words that were typed. And we'll run this function whenever the game is over. And select the array 2. And then for each, we're going to get the value that was typed, and then the index. And we can use the index to check to see which ones were correct. So within the console, first we're going to output the value. And I'll just use the backticks here. Typed, and then we'll check to see what the correct was. And the correct is coming from game array 1 and using the next value there in order to output the result. So there we've got the results that we typed test. That was the result. And then we've got the comparison there. So we can check to see the accuracy of what the results were that were typed in. So we want to check to see the accuracy as we're outputting it. So right now we're outputting the results there. In order to get the accuracy, we need to create a value for that and loop through the results that we have here for the current game word. And I'll just call that correct right now. And then using correct, we can loop through each one of the letters and check to see the accuracy for what was the value that was added there. So for each letter within the correct word, we check to see if the letter is equal to val, and this is again where we need to have an index value. So as we're looping through, that will return back the index of each one of the letters that we're using. And this will give us a way to check to see for the correctness. And starting this at 0, so if it is correct, it'll just increase by 1. And we can work out the accuracy by taking the value of the correct length and dividing it by what we have for the accuracy count. And we'll output the result that we have for that calculation. And with ES6, in order to loop through the string value, we need to use the 3 dots and then enclose it within the brackets like that. And that will give us a way to loop through each one of the letters. And that way we can calculate out the accuracy. So it looks like we threw a value of 1 for the infinity. And we'll update the accuracy into a ternary operator. So if it is still equal to 0, then the result is going to be that that's going to be 0. Otherwise, we'll do a result here, and then we want to multiply this by 100 to output it as a percentage. And we can also do a math floor for this. So let's see what we end up with the result and type some of the words. So we got the accuracy for the first one was 100, and then the following ones were 0% for the accuracy, and it's just got going into the game over. So here we've got an accuracy of 100%, and let's double check the math here where what we typed and what the end result was. So check what the calculations are that we're getting here as a result. And we can console log this out as we recalculate those values. And then for the console, let's also output what we have for the accuracy. And then I can recalculate those as needed. So let's adjust, and we're going to get the current value divided by the correct length, and then we'll multiply it by 100. So that should show us a percentage that we've got for the words that are being typed. So we've got, so as long as we've got the starting part of the word, we should get some points, some score for it. So that gives us a result here that we've got the duck was 75%, people was 83%, and the rat was 100% for the accuracy. So let's get rid of that. And now we're outputting the accuracy for the words that were typed, and that's depending on which letters that we've got. So we want to loop through them all and then make a total for the accuracy and a total result for the time that it took. So creating a value for that, and I'll just set the total to be 0, and we'll increment the total for the total accuracy. So declare some variables, and then this is going to be the total accuracy for T accuracy. So as we calculate out the accuracy, so the total accuracy, and we're going to increase it by the accuracy, and then the end result is that we can output the score, the amount of time that it took, and then also output some additional information out to the user. So within the output inner HTML, set the value. Let's calculate the total accuracy. And so the total will be equal to the t accuracy divided by the number of words that we had within this length. And we'll just set this value as the HTML value. In here, I'll set up another variable. So that will just be blank. Instead of updating to the inner HTML, we'll add to the HTML. And you can create elements as well for this. And then we'll add in the time afterwards. And then also add the HTML content. So that should output the results to the user. So your total accuracy, and it looks like something, the calculation for there went wrong. So what we can do is, in order to troubleshoot it, and we'll also get the length of content there. And that means that we need to actually set the tag to be 0. So that's a numeric value. Also use the math floor to round that value down. So that can be the math floor to round down this result and output the total accuracy. So let's go ahead and we're going to add in the time. So once we start the game, we want to track the amount of time that it's taking in order to run this. So that means that we need to track the time values. And we can show the time as well within a timer area. So I'm going to add that to the screen as well. So we've got an output text area. And I'll create an object called timer value. And this is where we can output the timer value. So by default, it will just be blank. And it could also have a class of output. That's fine. So within the timer value, and within the game, we want to track the start time. So within the game start, and we'll set this to be null as the default. And end, and we'll also set that to be null. So we want to track in the start and the end. And we can output the timer to the user. And that's going to be contained within the timer value element. So as we start the game and we've got the game in play, so set up a game timer object where we can set the interval. And within the interval, we'll get the difference between the start time and the current time. So we get the new date value and use the get time in order to return back the time in milliseconds. And we'll subtract the game start value from there. And that will return back the difference. So that means we should also track that game start value. And we also need to set a value for the game timer within the game object. So the timer is already set to null there. So we already have the game timer set. And once we start the game, this is where we want to track the game start. So we build the array, and within the game start value, this is going to use the new date object and get the time value for that within the milliseconds. So that will give us a difference that we can then output and display to the user. And we're going to track the number of minutes and the number of seconds. So we've got minutes, seconds, and then also the milliseconds that we're tracking for this variable. So in order to get the minutes, we can use the parse integer, get the difference divided by 1000 for the milliseconds, and 60 in order to return back the seconds. Let's update the minutes, and if minutes is less than 10, then we add a 0 to the total of minutes. And this is for the display value. Otherwise, we can just display it as is. And the same thing for seconds, where we're going to get the seconds value using the difference and just dividing it by 1000. So it's going to return back the number of seconds and set the seconds. And if seconds is less than 10, then we need to add in an extra 0 to the seconds result, so that it displays properly. with the extra 0 in place. We can also check to see if the seconds is greater than 60. And if it is, then we're going to just use seconds and a percentage of what the remainder is off of 60. For the milliseconds, that will be just a value that we have for the difference. And we'll check to see if the milliseconds is greater than 1000. And if it is, then we return back a value of the milliseconds and only returning back the remainder once it's divided by 1000. And within the timer, this is where we can output whatever the current time is. So within the timer value, let's set the text content for the timer value and then equal that to whatever we've got for the minutes divided by the value for the seconds and then separated by the value for the milliseconds. So that should provide us a way to show a timer. And then we're going to show it every 10 milliseconds. So there's our timer. And then we want to end the timer once the game is over. So we want to clear the interval on the game over. So let's do that where we take so check to see if the game timer exists. And if game timer does exist, then we can use the clear interval in order to clear the game timer. So this will result in stopping the game timer. So let's try that. Oop, it looks like I pressed it too many times there. So we need to do some troubleshooting afterwards. So that stopped the timer. I'm going to create a separate function called output timer. And what this will do is this will return back the output result there. So that we need for the text content. So it'll return back a string value. So we can use that in the final result as well in order to output the timer. So where we've got the time of, you can get the result back from the output timer. Where we've got the game over in order to display it to the user. So we've got a time of, it will output the result there for the. So now we've got a accuracy of 0 with a time of, there's our time. And just let's clean this up a bit. So there's our total accuracy 33 with a time of, there's our final time. The accuracy for the word we typed and the result. And the word that it was supposed to be. And you can clean this up as well a little bit more in order to display it for the user. So once the game is over, we don't want any more typing to be allowed into the game. So when we can control that within the show words, where we've got the game play, within the game in play. So we want to make sure that the game is in play as we're showing the words. So we can wrap the entire value there with making sure that the game is in play before we do anything else with the game content. And just wrapping it within a bracket to make sure that the game is in play. And then we're also, whenever the game is over, we'll just set this to be false. And then set the text content area, the text area, to be disabled. So once the game is over, set the disabled to be true. So we can't no longer type into it. And then that will end the game. We can also hide it to do a display none. So there's a few options there. So that will hide it from view completely. Let's remove out the time value from display once the game is over. So within the game over, going over to here and set that also to style display and set the display to be none. So that will hide that from view. And we also want to show a way to start the game again. So let's go ahead and we're going to add the start button back in and update what we've got for the button. So set the button to display and the button style display to be block. And for the button text content, it'll just say restart game. And we need to just restart some of the values. So now we've got an option to restart the game. So it looks like we are still showing the game over. So we need to make some clears on that whenever we start the game brand new again. We're still showing the old values that we had. So we need to reset some of the values that we've got contained within there when we start the game. So I'm just going to copy that. And as we start the game, so we're already displaying the game in play. So that one is going to be set to true. The current game object, let's set that to have a value of 0. We can set the game timer to equal to null. The number can stay the same. Take the game array 1 and set the length of that to be 0. And then also the length of the second game array to be 0. And then the game start time can be null as well. And this is just resetting some of the values that we're using within the game. You can adjust these as needed, and this will give us the ability to restart the game. So as we're building the array, and I think we already have within the build array, we're setting the game length to be 0, so we don't need to do that again. And we'll just make sure that we can restart the game. So when we restart, we should have none of the results from before. So now we've got the accuracy, so everything is working. We restart the game again, and we can play through a number of times, or as many times as needed. Let's double check the game object and just make sure that we're not adding any additional items into there. So we just have the 3 that we've selected. So these are always going to change, and these are always going to be new every time we restart the game. So now we've got the conclusion to the game. You can add in some finishing touches on that, also updating some of the way that the content is being displayed. So let's select that text area or the timer area within the output, update a font size for that. Also, let's align and set the input as centered. You can also update and have the button object and add some more styling to the button. So that gives it more of that type of effect, and apply the styling as needed.